this afternoon. I'm going to sit right there in the chair and welcome questions for the trio. I'm just kidding. But we're going to do one more, and then, you know, Mark said so graciously earlier, please be thinking of questions. I love questions. And so we can start a dialogue, and we can play more, and we can talk more, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So I'd like to bring up my twin now to join me, Tony Wiggy. The composition we just finished playing was something entitled Pen Up House, and the one before that was It Could Happen to You. And we're going to do now a good old standard, and this is entitled All the Things You Love. Intro. so that you know we have CDs for sale in the back of the room if you'd like to take us home with you in the form of a compact disc. That would be much appreciated. Any questions or comments?
This is Corey, is that his name?
Tony.
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 Do you play the trombone too, Tony?
No, I don't. Trombone Tony.
You're in the same range as the trombone though, is that right?
It's actually the range of the trumpet actually, but just a warmer sound. It's not as bright as the trumpet. It's a flugelhorn, so it's basically the same as the trumpet, with just a darker sound. Terell plays a great flugelhorn.
Yeah, sure. Describe to us how you breathe. I'm just curious,
Well,
what are you doing?
I open up my nose really wide.
Yeah.
No, I'm just kidding.
Now, I know.
So I breathe off, my whole breathing concept is from Arnold Jacobs. So
Right.
the whole,
Yeah.
and that's where I started to play trumpet in Chicago. So growing up in Chicago, just being a huge fan of Bud Herseth and Vincent Chigowitz, and just a huge fan of the trumpet, and hearing that orchestra so much. So I became a fan of Arnold Jacobs, and following the tradition of Arnold Jacobs, I use two syllables when I breathe. So my inhale is ho, I think about a whole syllable, and my exhale I think about who. And the reasons why I do, because a whole syllable opens me up as much as I can get, all the air in my lungs. Sometimes when people teach a brass instrument, they tell people to breathe from down here and to push with the diaphragm, and I don't do any of that. I don't use a diaphragm at all. I mean, I do, but I use it in the privacy of my own bathroom at home. But that's when I put my diaphragm to use. And but other than that, I don't want to treat what I do at home the way I play the trumpet. So I take in air by saying ho, and I try to get the sound of ho when I take the air in, and then when I exhale, I say who, and I say who for a lot of reasons. A, keeps everything open. A lot of people when I see they have there's something called active inhale and active exhale. So both, if you have an active inhale and active exhale, then who and ho are going to work to your advantage. If you have an active inhale and a passive exhale, then what happens is you create tension. So what I want to have is active on both. And so my who is very, very active. So it's as active as my inhale. So my exhale with who kind of gets my corners forward, which is attributes to my range, my endurance, flexibility, getting corners forward and not pulling corners back. The reason why the lips have to vibrate, the lips are like, reeds, and once you bite down on a reed, it stops vibration. So I want to keep around this area as free as possible. And if there's any place where my strength comes from, it would be from my corners. So if I start to feel fatigue, my fatigue is here and not here. Because I stay away from the word chops. We use, my chops feel terrible. But when I play, the last thing I think about are my lips. My lips are kind of a prop in which my mouthpiece sits on. And so if I do exercises to strengthen my corners and to get my concept coming forward, then that helps my overall concept of playing the trumpet. So that's my breathing concept, ho and who. And then there's so much more involved with it. I carry around an ultra breathe, which is an incentive spirometer. I can show you what it is. And the reason I use an incentive spirometer, when I was in graduate school, actually my teacher had an incentive spirometer. It was blue and it was about that high and it had a ball in it. And you blow into it, and when you exhale, the ball will go up, or you turn it upside down and the ball will go down, whatever. And you'd use this to visualize your breathing. And he thought that was his whole point, was that playing the trumpet is just a total form of imagery. And if you can start to imagine certain things when you play, then you can get your mind off the physical trumpet. So one thing was like thinking about a violin. If you could think about a violin and not like you're playing a trumpet, it can, get you away from the breaks of the trumpet. And you'd also say trumpet is like a yawn. So yawn is the most natural thing we can do. It's kind of addictive. When you say the word yawn, I look around the room and I actually see people start yawning. They're like, oh, that's a good word. So, and if playing a brass instrument can be, in some way synonymous to a yawn, then that means that we can be as relaxed as possible. And I think that's how we can achieve the most on our instruments, by being as relaxed as possible. We can achieve, physical attributes. We can achieve musical attributes. We can achieve attributes as connecting with rhythm sections to open our ears up enough and not get involved in who we are and what we do. So a lot is involved with breathing. So with my ultra breathe, I was in Chicago for an IAJE and I stood outside for a shuttle way longer than I should have in below zero weather. And when I got home, come to find out I had pneumonia. So after getting pneumonia, my pulmonologist told me that I had severe scarring on my lungs. And he says, you know, playing the trumpet is going to be a battle from this point on, and because what that created is asthma. So now, consequently, I have asthma. So with asthma, playing the trumpet, it's not a beautiful thing. Some mornings it's okay. So with this incentive spirometer, I'll show you what it is. I inhale on it 20 times a day, and when I do that, it gets my lungs, just stretches them out some. It kind of gets me in a space to play, and it helps out with my asthma too. It keeps me off some of these stupid inhalers because they make my hand shake. But I'll show you what this is. So it used to be huge. These used to be huge, but this is what it is now. And this is like I said, it's an incentive spirometer. And what makes it an incentive spirometer is that I have resistance when I inhale and zero resistance when I exhale.
Okay.
So, and I do this, and I'll even do it in the day if I'm feeling like tightness in my chest or whatever. So I carry this around everywhere. And this one's really new. I used to have one that was huge. And Wycliffe Gordon knew I had asthma and the whole breathing thing. So he found this in London and actually brought it back for me. Now, couldn't imagine life without my ultra breathe. That's what it was. Wow. Yeah. So, did I answer your breathing question?
Oh, yeah, very much so.
All right. Yes.
I'm just wondering if there's anything you do consciously in your day-to-day life or your practice routines to kind of cultivate that inspired, kind of collaborative spirit that I always see you playing with your groups. Whether it's, like I said, a musical thing or a day-to-day thing.
I think most important part of my day starting out is my devotion, getting myself centered. And then from there, I do a routine. I'm a routine-oriented person, so if you hang out with me on the road and I find a favorite place, you know where I'm going to go every day, and you probably know what I'm going to order every day. So I've been trying to work myself out of that, because that's what I'll do. Like in the hotel, they'll see me at the same time and I order the same thing, so they don't even look at me anymore. They're like, we know. Turkey chili and a Caesar salad. Yeah. So that's my meal for the day, you know. But so I start my day out that way, and then I think, you know, feeding our soul and body is really important. So then after I get, you know, myself centered in the morning, I usually go for a run. And on my run is when I think about what I need to do for that day. I think about what I did the night before when I played, and that I don't want to repeat what I did the night before on certain things. Certain things I may want to try it again and keep going for it. Other things I want to leave it alone. And I start to formulate what I need to practice. And then I start to do my routine, and inside of my routine is really simple. It like consists of these Vincent Chikowitz flow studies. And the flow studies are simple. I mean, but inside of that flow study, just now when I played it, I already thought about 3 things I need to work on before I play tonight, you know. I didn't like my attack. My attack didn't have the clarity, it didn't have the ictus that I wanted on it. I didn't like the way the break went from the D to the E, so I want to make sure that is clean. On my way down, I didn't like the way my notes slotted, which was me. So within that flow study, if I pay attention to detail, which I think is really important when we practice, because sometimes we practice to tell people that we practice 8 hours, but 8 hours of practice on this instrument is probably the dumbest thing one can do. You know, because you start to learn with time. You know, you become smart practicers, and you don't need 8 hours. I mean, 2 hours is totally suffice. You know, so inside of my routine, which is 30 minutes. I go through the flow studies, I go through some articulation stuff, I go through some flexibility stuff, and then I see within my routine what I struggled on that particular day. And I thought about, like again I said the night before, and that pretty much dictates how I need to practice for the next hour or so.
Okay.
And I'll just pick every single thing apart. And if I don't get very far in what I need to achieve, it's okay. If I can accomplish 2 out of 10 things that are on my mind, I can give myself a break, you know. That's 2 more steps forward than I was the day before.
Okay.
So, and plus it encourages me to continue the next day, you know. If I beat myself up and say, man, I should have gotten all 10 done, I'm a total failure, you know. That's just discouraging every time you pick up the instrument. And this is not an instrument that you want to really pick up without confidence. You know, it'll tell on you. It'll definitely tell. So, you know, you start to be a really good actor because days you don't feel like playing it, you have to act like you do so it doesn't know. I love you.
Do you set a lot of long-term goals for yourself?
I do. I write all my goals down.
You have a practice journal? Or-
No. I mean, people send me like apps for that. I just write it on a pad or I write it on my memos on my phone. But I've been writing my goals down since I've been, probably since I've been like 18, you know. And so, you know, when I started playing trumpet at 13, and I wanted to start playing trumpet at 11. So my goal at 11 was to learn how to play the trumpet and to play in a concert band, because I heard that's all I heard. But at 11, they didn't allow me to play the trumpet because brass instruments weren't offered until 5th grade. So I played the viola. It's a long story, but, you know.
I was forced in viola at one time.
Yeah, that was probably the worst experience of my life playing viola. I mean, my teacher would hit me on the fingers every time I'd make a mistake. And so there was one day that my fingers were just destroyed. My knuckles were all swollen from all the mistakes I made. So, you know, I said to myself, if this dude comes in with that bow, as soon as he lifts it, I'm going to block it. You know, and I blocked it and hit him right in the face. He suspended me from music for a year. Called my parents in and says, your son has no musical talent whatsoever. Keep him as far away from music. So, you know, I couldn't participate for a year, but then after that year, I started to play. And I started writing my goals down then. You know, my parents were kind of freaked out by it because, you know, they're like, you have to do your homework. Then if you do all your homework, then you can practice the trumpet. So I'd get everything done and just practice until I had to stop. And that's kind of how I've been. You know, they never, even to this day, I can't wait to wake up to practice. You know, that's my hobby. I go to vacation. I went to Hawaii in May. You know, I was like, I'm not going to touch my trumpet. I told all my friends, I'm going to bring it, but I'm not going to touch it. It's a vacation. Yeah. And each morning it would say, hello. You know, I'd pick it up and just play it like half hour just to get it out of my system. And I told them I didn't play it. I told them a little lie. Yeah.
Terell, how do you warm up before you take the stage, and how important is that?
You know, I warm up and warm down as many times as I pick up the horn. So when I practice in the morning, after I practice, I warm down so that when I put the horn down, I put it down in the same manner that I picked it up. So I do, you know, before I play, I try not to make what I do too strenuous because, you know, if you come into, right before you play, if you try to do too much on the instrument and it doesn't work, then you lose your confidence. And if you don't do enough, then you start to say, I should have done more. So I find ways just to play long notes and to play between partials, and that usually tells me what I need to do to adjust to the performance. Because I think that's really important, you know. Warming up right before you play pretty much tells you how you need to play that night. You know, because if you come in and you feel 100%, then when you play your horn for that performance, you should probably play 80%. You know, because that 20% margin is what you need to just, that's your margin of, you know, protecting your longevity of the instrument. And if I come in, you know, feeling 80%, then usually I'm going to play probably 70% what I can play. Now that's 70% of what's on my mind. It may not translate to the listener that way, but that's how I approach the instrument. And I really approach it even more conservatively if I have to record. You know, we all do, because I hate making mistakes. So in the recording studio, I hate doing more than one take. If I'm playing in a band, I promise that I won't make a mistake, so you can do one take, you know. Because it drives me, you know, you do that one take, you put it all into that one take, and then some people are like, let's do another one. Why? For what? That was fine. Well, let's just do one for safety. Safety? Make a copy of the last take. Why do we need to do another one? So, you know, I kind of learned that from John Clayton. He's a one-take person. So when I record with the Clayton Brothers, I mean, some of their music is really intricate. So I'll shed it so much during the week if we're playing somewhere so that when we do the recording, I don't miss. Because if as soon as you miss, then they're like, oh, come on, man. You know, they start to vibe. So I just want to do one take, and he's like, cool, next. Great. We can finish a record in a day. then there are other people who are like, let's just do one more take. Let's see if it can be more organic. Let's think about the stars in this next take. You know, so, but anyway, back to the warm-up. So, you know, I kind of guide my warm-up to the performance. Like playing this week, the Bistro is probably one of the hardest rooms I've played. It's a great room because the people are incredible, the staff's incredible, and I love playing in St. Louis. But from this instrument, it's one of the hardest places to play ever on earth because it's just too much carpet. So you get no sonic love in that room at all. So, you know, you talk to brass players who play that room, they leave the room and they have injury after they leave the room because you work twice as hard to give the sound that you think you need to hear in that room. So kind of through the years, what I've learned is that there's a balcony upstairs, and if I can put my bell high enough, that's the only sound that I get back. If I don't, then it's tough the whole night. Like this room is super easy to play, you know. All the wood and everything, great surfaces, you can bounce sound off everywhere in this room. So, you know, playing at the Bistro, I'm really conservative in a warm-up. In between sets, I warm down, play a few notes before the set, and then after the sets are over, I take a good 20 minutes to warm down. Because, you know, I don't get a break as a leader in a group. That's the joy of a sideman. You know, someone else is going to play the ballad. As a leader, you have to play the ballad. So, you know, since I don't get a break, you know, it's all about pacing. And then after the set is over, I spent 30 minutes last night warming down until I felt as if I needed to play another set, I could have, you know. And that's the concept of my warm down. Let me get everything nice and relaxed and centered. And then usually when I wake up, it's a friendly instrument to play if I warm down. If I don't, it's a beast the next morning. And I see a lot of trumpet players, man. They finish the gig, they put that bad boy away, and they go out and do whatever they need to do. I don't know how they can do it. Because when I do that, it just makes the next day awful. Awful. So, great question. Yes, Ms. Montgomery.
What kind of advice do you have for young people who are listening to jazz music? What has your trumpet taught you about life?
My trumpet taught me to let life unfold and don't plan too much because you're not in control. So with this instrument, there's a lot that we can control, but I think the less we try to control, the more music can happen. And, you know, I'm not supposed to be here playing what I'm supposed to be playing now. My goal and dreams were to play in an orchestra. I wanted to be like one of the first African Americans in an orchestra. So as a youngster, you know, going to hear the Chicago Symphony, that's what I was doing, working on my excerpts, getting my Artunian together, my Tomasi together, my Brandenburg together. You know, I love the piccolo trumpet, so I was practicing piccolo trumpet like crazy. And just trying to get my whole classical repertoire together. And my father went to school with Cannonball Adderley, and every day he was like, man, you got to play some jazz, man. I went to school with this alto saxophonist and this trumpet player and that. Man, and they could really play. You should hear them. I'm like, nah, that's okay. I think I'll pass. You know, if you have any Maurice Andre or any Dave Hickman, I really, you know, buy me those recordings. So, you know, for the longest time, I was kind of anti-jazz. And then I got to college, and my trumpet hero, Bud Herseth, came into the trumpet masterclass room, and he was speaking with all the trumpet players. And so I asked him, I said, you know, when you're not playing in the symphony, what do you do? He goes, well, I go to church, and after I get out of church, I go play in a Dixieland band. I was like, and I thought you were a good trumpet player. And so I said, what do you get out of a Dixieland band? He goes, I get freedom. I get freedom. You know, in the orchestra, you know, I'm not allowed to miss, and I play a certain repertoire, and I've been playing it all my life. When I play Dixieland, I get freedom. I can play whatever I want. Nobody's going to judge me on what I do. And I said, well, who are some of your influences? He goes, well, my best friend in the world is Clark Terry. I was like, oh, no. And I totally went in my perception. And so, you know, he goes, Clark Terry and I were in the Navy together. And he went on and on about Clark Terry. And when I finished my undergraduate degree, which I can get in, that's a whole other story. I quit trumpet for about 6 months. But, you know, when I started to play again, I auditioned for graduate school, and I wanted to get my master's in classical trumpet, but I was like, man, jazz cannot be that hard to play. I mean, wiggle my fingers a little bit faster than So consequently, I got rejected from the jazz program at Rutgers and accepted to the classical program. And you know, when that happened, it was humbling, you know, seeing that letter saying rejected, declined, that's what it said, it didn't say reject, it said declined. It was very humbling, and when I got to school there, I kind of made it my mission to go sit by people's practice room and listen to them practice, and kind of taught myself when I was in graduate school to play jazz. So my whole thing for young people is like, you know, dedicate yourself to what you believe in, you know, set your goals higher than what you may achieve, but set them high and go after them. And you know, you just never know what direction, you know, life is going to take you, but accept every turn as it comes. And that would be my advice, because that's kind of what I've had to do. I've accepted the fact that I don't play in an orchestra, and it's cool. I'd rather play with these guys because they're amazing, and I can come in here and I can learn and I can communicate and I can be fed and feed, and you know, that's what life's really about. And so I'm content and happy where I am.
Thank you.
Mhm. Yes.
Another technical question. Sounds like you don't use much pressure mouthpiece on the lips.
I don't like pressure. Pressure doesn't like me either. You know, when I was younger, I still play off to the center, but I played really high. I could play really high when I was younger, like double C's, E's, and F's. And I was in the marching band in college. And I would fake it through most of the games, and then I'd wait, you know, fake it through most of the halftime show until I got to the last note. And then the last note would come, and I would just hit the loudest double B flat or double C, and you know, people would go crazy because they were trying to, and you know, it's funny because they're looking, where'd that high note come from? Where'd it come from? And so, but consequently, doing that, I was using so much pressure. I was using preparation H on my lips after I played because the swelling was just so intense. And I was even using petroleum jelly on the inside of my lips because the cuts were so severe. And it sucked. I'm going to tell you now. I mean, having to play the instrument in that much pain, you know, it would be usually the day after a game. I would be in just huge amounts of pain. And if I were to use that much pressure now, I'd never make it through. I'd never make it through a day. I mean, it's easy in New York for me to have an 8-hour recording session and then have a 4-hour gig that night. So, you know, with that much playing, you know, I really can't afford to use a lot of pressure and get tired. So, consequently, there are exercises that I do to alleviate pressure. And one is just holding the horn, like right here. Now, I'd never ever play trumpet like this, but that's using zero pressure. Even if I try to use pressure, it would slip out of my hands. And then when I hold the horn, I try to get that same sensation. Even imagery, seeing me hold the horn up like this. There was a teacher of mine when I was younger who tied a string to the ceiling and held the horn by a string. And that was interesting too. But you know, a friend of mine who was studying with him played the horn, and the string went out, and when the tip came back, so after he got his teeth repaired, so I didn't do the string thing too much. But you know, when you hold it in your hand, you still get the same sensation. And you don't take the pressure off so that you don't have to go that way. And I also, I choose the corners, yep. I say the higher I go, the more who I try to say to keep the lips forward. And consequently, I don't know if you've shaken people with the dead fish handshake. You know, I always try to break those hands because it's like the weirdest thing for someone to go, hey, how you doing? So I have the fish handshake on this hand. I try to get my fingertips away from the horn so that the horn basically is just sitting on this finger. And if I can get that, then my endurance is usually okay. There's some days that it's not. You just pick it up and it's just a bad day. And you try to make a great day out of a bad day. You end up with an average day. So I hope I answered your question. Yes.
I'm so hoping you can play a ballad with this beautiful band, but I was wondering when you mentioned before that playing a ballad is more difficult.
Yeah.
Can you say a bit about that, about what makes it harder for you than it might be for a guitar player or piano or?
It's hard for, you know, a ballad is difficult for everyone. I mean, I think some people it's not, you know. one of my favorite ballad players is Frank West. I love the way he plays a ballad. And, you know, for years playing with him, I never had the nerve to ask him, what's his concept of playing a ballad, until maybe 2 years ago or something like that. And I don't know if you've heard Frank West talk, you know, it's kind of whiny. You know? So I said, Frank, man, can you tell me what you thought in your mind when you play a ballad? What else is on your mind but the melody? He said, that's one of the dumbest questions you ever Because people say there's no dumb questions, that was a dumb one. Thank you, Mr. West. So, in playing a ballad, there's just so many people who have different approaches, you know. Listening to Dexter play a ballad, you know, his manipulation of time and sound. Listening to Frank West play a ballad and how just gentle. Listening to Tom Harrell play a ballad and how fragile it sounds, you know. And I mean, there's just different ways to approach it. And, you know, it's great to learn the story of the ballad as well, so you can say that. But, you know, I guess from a physical aspect, you know, if you're playing 5 or 6 songs in a night, the other night we were asked to play a 90-minute concert. So in a 90-minute concert, I had 2 ballads to play. So I never took the horn from my face for 9 tunes. That was a challenge because in my mind I'm thinking pace, pace, pace. Nice sound up there. So, you know, we can play a ballad, but I think the thing about it is, and a ballad more than anything, you know, the whole word emoting is a scary word. You know, that's one word you don't talk about in education. You know, because how do you explain emoting? You know, now you have to speak about feelings. Let's keep it to theory and let's keep it to harmony and let's leave the feeling stuff out of it. But you know, it's really important for people to do that. You know, this is important too. So we'll play a ballad and we'll see where we are. Yes.
I'm guessing by the names of the heroes from Chicago, you use Mouthpiece. I know she used White and Balance.
Hold on one second. No, just listen. I'm slightly distracted. They're going to come in and give the master class.
This is how we do this thing.
No, city fans.
This is awesome. how you doing?
You had a question? Yay!
I guess I was wondering with the adverse that you had, whether the largest of the mouthpiece and the weighted valves would be a contraindication of that. Meaning if you put more air into the horn and exacerbate the asthma.
You know, I don't know if the horn or the mouthpiece either helps or hinders my asthma, or asthma in general. As far as the mouthpiece goes, I think the size of the mouthpiece is just a really, really personal thing. When I said earlier I quit playing the trumpet, the reason why I quit, because I had a teacher whose intentions I think were good, but you know, he was the type of person that he said that, here's the trumpet I play, you need to play the exact trumpet I play. Here's the mouthpiece I play, you need to play it, and here's how I play it, so that's how you need to play it. And he had a really hard time with me not playing in the center, really hard time. It used to bug him, you know. So for the longest time, I come into lessons and he'd have me put it in the center and play for him. So week after week, I'd come in and go, and he'd say, Terell, that was really good. Keep doing it, keep doing it. So I did it every week for a long time, and I play like that in my lessons, and when my practice room, I practice my own way, you know. And then one day he came by my practice room and watched me practice. I didn't know he was at the door, and he saw me practicing, you know. And he came and he goes, you know, you failed me as a student. You know, you don't play in the center, so you know you'll never be able to play the trumpet past the age of 25. So that day when he said that to me, I was like, okay. So I got a minor in math, and I tutored in trigonometry, and I got a minor in computers. So I became a computer programmer when I graduated. And I said, this isn't what I want to do. And when I met Winton about 6 months later, he told me about his teacher. He says, you know, when you go to the teacher, just talk to him about playing the trumpet. He'll let you know if you should play or not. And the only thing he talked about in the lesson I had with him was air. You know, air, 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 air. And I said, well, what trumpet should I play? He goes, I don't care what you play. I said, well, what mouthpiece should I play? He goes, whatever feels best. So, you know, from that, I said, you don't want me to play what you play? And he goes, no. He goes, what I play is, you know, I'm a 70-year-old man. You're not going to play what I play. And it was really interesting. He gave me the freedom for the first time to kind of make a decision on what I wanted to do. And so I played a one because I did play mostly orchestral stuff. I played a 1.5 C sometimes. I went from a 1, straight 1, to like a 1 1/4, then a 1.5. And I played a 1.5 for years. And it's just been 2 years that I've been playing this mouthpiece. I was on a tour with Jon Faddis, and you know, he's one of my best friends, and he's one of the most honest people I've ever met. And he goes, man, I've been dying to say something to you for the past year or so. And I said, what? He goes, the mouthpiece that you're playing right now is probably the worst sounding thing I've ever heard in my life. He goes, you know, you left it on the counter, and I picked it up and looked at it, and he goes, who designed that? And I said, I did. He goes, okay, tell me the physics of designing a mouthpiece. I said, I don't know. I just designed something that was comfortable. And he goes, you know what? Everything in life shouldn't be that comfortable. You should think about efficiency more than you do comfort. Because if you're efficient, then your body will adapt and become comfortable. And I never thought about it that way. So I played a mouthpiece that created a certain sound and gave me a certain feeling. And he goes, if you don't believe what I'm saying, he goes, I'm going to describe to you everything that I hear when you play the trumpet. And he made a list. And then he put his mouthpiece guy on the phone. He goes, hey, Scott, I want you to talk to Terell for a second. He gave me the phone. I said, Scott, can you describe to me what you hear when I play? He gave me the exact same list in different order than what Faddis said. So I said, fine. So this was my Christmas present. Faddis years ago. And it doesn't have a number. I don't know what it is, and I don't want to know. You know?
Just don't lose it.
Yeah. Well, you know, he has a copy of it, so, you know, I'm just like, you know, so the thing about it is that, you know, I don't want to get hung up too much on things that really don't matter that much to me. It's a different concept because it's a sharp, I know, I can tell what it feels like. It's a sharp inner edge, which does remind you when you use pressure. It will remind you.
I guess the point is making the weighted valve so that adds resistance to the horn.
I don't even know.
I would think would make it, you'd have to
You know what,
have more asthma control.
these weights came on here, so I don't know what it feels like to play the horn without them. I played a summer before this, and I had a couple weighted valves, but I didn't use them for resistance. I didn't use the weightedness for resistance. I can create resistance through my mouthpiece if I want to create resistance. And you can also create resistance from lead tape. You can put lead tape on the bell, because what you want to do is kill some of the overtones so that you can get the colors of the sound you hear. And to me, that's what the heavy caps do. They kill some overtones and it creates a different type of chord to the sound. And so that's why I like these. I don't necessarily use them for resistance. This helps me with my resistance. And so if I need more resistance here, if I need more resistance, then I'll get my back or my mouthpiece to be a little bit tighter. But so that's, and this horn for me is more resistance than I've ever, it's a little smaller horn. So I just had to learn how to play it when I started to play it and back off a little bit. And if I do, I can pretty much play it all day. It's a lighter horn, so it reverberates more. I remember years ago, I was out on the road with Faddis on a similar tour. It was Faddis and Randy Brecker, Lou Soloff, and myself. And this trumpet company in Switzerland brought these flugelhorns. They're called Indebeine. And they brought these flugelhorns to the hotel, and they laid them out. And of course, me, I picked up the heaviest horn because it was, heavy is darker, and I thought, man, if I get this horn, I'm gonna get the biggest sound. And Faddis picked up the lightest horn and got the darkest sound. So I said, man, how is that? How am I playing the heavy horn and you're playing the lighter horn? He goes, sound is about reverberation. That horn doesn't vibrate, but this one does. And that's what his point was. He goes, so when you select a horn, find one that vibrates. And that's why I kind of don't play a monet, because they're such big, thick horns. They don't vibrate the way I like them. They sound great when Wynton plays it, but so I don't know, maybe the heavy caps may add some resistance for me, but I haven't really thought about it to that extent. There was a great saying that my trumpet teacher, Fielder, always used to say, he'd say, in the practice room, I want you to think about everything I say to you, but when it's time to perform, I want you to let it go, because analysis creates paralysis. And his other favorite saying was, mind over matter. If it's not in your mind, it doesn't matter. So he was a big person to clear your mind and your thoughts and let it all go and just use air. That was his big thing. And it took me a long time to believe that. It's just like, air, really? If I just breathe and put air into this horn, it's going to work? And it has. And I can change syllables. Like when these guys came here, so that I didn't hurt myself, I changed my syllable to play with them. So I went from like an O syllable that I normally play to an E syllable, so that I could play with them and get more velocity. So I can still use the same amount of air and still back off on pressure, but changing the palate in my mouth zips the air, so it sounds much more, it projects more and sounds more like, yeah.
Are you humming the syllable as you're exhaling?
No.
Okay. Because I was at the concert last night, and I guess there might have been someone in the audience that was, singing while you were playing, but it made it sound like you were humming.
Oh, I was humming then, but I was humming for a different reason.
Okay.
I mean, to growl on the trumpet, you hum.
Okay.
Everybody thinks growling has to do with the back of your throat going, or going, but that's flutter tonguing. So when I growl, so I do growl. Yeah, I was humming. That was me.
Okay.
That was my singing debut. Yes. You know what? Richard, she had.
What advice do you have for music teachers when they get middle schoolers into the jazz thing or just playing the horn?
It's a great thing. I mean, the thing that got me into classical music in general and the music that I played is every rehearsal I walked into the room, there was music playing. And it's shocking to me sometimes. I walk into different rehearsals and I go to different clinics and there's dead silence. But if music is playing, when students walk in and they're getting their instruments out, they'll always say, what is that? Who is that? What's going on? And especially if it can be incorporated inside of lessons. That's the one thing. We teach a lot about the technique of the instrument, and we teach a lot about the history and the theory behind it, but we never teach students how to listen. You know, and a great exercise would be to put on a recording and say, okay, this is going to be what we're going to listen for. I want everyone to be able to hum the melody. Hum the melody, and tomorrow I'll be able to hum it without the recording. Everyone hum the saxophone part. That's the harmony. Everyone hum the ride cymbal pattern. So now you're getting people to start to listen to different parts of the band and put it all together. And when they do listen outside of class, they'll say, oh yeah, here's the harmony. This is the melody, this is the harmony, that's the rhythm section. Bass player's walking. Let me sing the bass lines. Learn on the bass line, all of a sudden they can improvise because they've heard all the guide tones. You know, bass players, they're walking. Bass players are always the best soloists because they get as much practice as anyone playing through the changes, you know, and making a vertical structure to a horizontal structure. And that's what we all want to do when we improvise. So, you know, having students just to start doing things like that. Give them listening exercises. Make a little recording of, you know, I don't know, opera vive, and say, this is Charlie Parker wrote this, blah, blah, blah. You know, so I think as music teachers, we can really start to incorporate listening more. I taught a class in the art of listening, you know, and in the art of listening, I would bring in different recordings, and we'd have, you know, it would be different transcription projects, of course, but just sitting down, having students be able to articulate what they hear. Say, what did you hear when you heard this? Sounds cool. It's more than that. I mean, you know, so, you know, just teaching how to listen and playing enough recordings when they get into they're curious and they're hungry. I think that's a start. Yes?
2 questions. Do you still play classical at all? And also, when you started, because you switched to jazz later, how did you start teaching yourself to improvise, or how did you go about figuring that out?
Well, as far as me playing classical, I have 0 confidence right now to play classical music. You know, I mean, when I first started teaching at Temple, I played a lot of classical trumpet, and I played with a lot of guys in the Philadelphia Orchestra, which was inspiring for me, but was scary, because it was like, why am I doing this? They do this every day of their lives. They wake up with a C trumpet in their hand, and they go, and I play it every now and then. So when I play with them, I'd be like, oh God, they're gonna hate me because I'm this. So, and in school, I recorded a couple kind of classical things, which sucked because I didn't get any sleep 2 weeks prior. My nerves were so wrecked. And I just didn't like it, and I called Winton, and I was like, man, what can I do to get through this concerto? I remember it was a commissioned piece that I had to play, and I hated the piece, first of all. It was the dumbest piece of music I ever had. Because I love melody, and there was no melody. It was just like, it's like, really? It sounded like glorified diarrhea in a way. That's what I So I didn't like the piece, and I had to play it. And so when I called Winton, I said, man, what can I do to get through this piece? He goes, man, when I was preparing for some of the concertos that I had to play after he won the Grammy, doing all that, he said I had to see a shrink regularly. I was going for acupuncture. I was a nervous wreck. He goes, that's why I don't do it now. And he goes, so, you know, find a shrink, get some acupuncture. So basically, it's just hard to maintain. You know, it's 2 different worlds. You know, someone who does both really well and can maintain, it's a rare thing. You know, especially at a really high level. So I don't play too much of it. What was the second part of your question?
How did you become a jazz player?
You know, my curiosity that really made me practice jazz was, in grad school, I was doing a faculty recital, and I had to play this Handel piece, Led the Bright Seraphim, and it goes, bum, 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 bum. Soprano would sing that, and then on piccolo you come in, bum, 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 and then she'd go, bum, 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 and I'd imitate her. So the next part goes, bum, 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 ba-da-dum, bum, ba-da-da-da-da-da-da-da. But she went, bum, I was like, that's not what's written. She goes, this is broke. We can do what we want to do. When I sing it, you imitate me. And so she did it again, and I tried to imitate her on piccolo trumpet, and I couldn't. And it was, you know, piccolo's in the A side anyway of the piccolo. So now I'm starting to have to hear everything a half step down and try to get to where she was. It was driving me crazy. I couldn't do it. So she goes, you know, before the next rehearsal, this is very disappointing. You know, you're getting your master's thesis in the evolution of the piccolo trumpet. Thought you'd come in here and you were a specialist and you'd be able to do this, and I'm very disappointed. I was like, oof. So I went in a practice room and I started practicing every single way that I could play these ornaments. so I was like, I'm gonna get ready. And when I was doing this, there was a dude in the practice room next to me, and I go, and next to me he go, I stopped and I played a little bit more. All of a sudden I'd wait. I said, I think he's making fun. So I put my piccolo down and knocked on the door. I said, man, what are you doing? He goes, man, you're the first classical player that plays different stuff. I love it. He goes, he's like, man, my name is David Sanchez. I was like, wow, man, nice to meet you, He goes, I'm here from Puerto Rico, and I'm really trying to learn how to swing, and, Professor Fielder, your trumpet teacher, is always yelling at me, and he goes, I said, well, man, he goes, all you're doing next door is playing jazz, you're just doing it on a different instrument. He goes, you should learn more about it. I was like, well, who could teach me? And he goes, Professor Fielder, he taught Winton, and he taught Terrence Blanchard, and all these jazz guys, and so I went to him, I said, Prof, that's what I called him, I said, I want to learn how to play jazz. He goes, son, no. I said, well, why not? He goes, because you don't play the trumpet well enough. You still get tired when you play the Brandenburg. And I'm like, who doesn't get tired when I play? So he wouldn't let me, and he goes, if I hear that you play jazz, I will kick you out of my studio. And which means you will be kicked out of school because I'm the only trumpet teacher. So I was like, okay. So I didn't play jazz. I went to David and I said, he won't teach me. And he goes, well, I said, what should I do? And he goes, go talk to Kenny Barron. And I said, I'm not sure if that's a good idea. And so he goes, why? What happened? So I said, I auditioned for the classical and jazz program here. And when I auditioned for the jazz program, they said, your accompanist for your jazz audition is going to be Kenny Barron. And I said, I didn't know who Kenny Barron was. So when I came to my audition, he goes, what are you going to play? I said, a blues? Do you know that? I think I can make it through. So this is a truth. So after I played Now's the Time. And then after I played Now's the Time, I stopped. And Kenny was like, were you going to improvise? And I said, sure. Well, what do you want to hear? He goes, play what you know. So I started playing what I knew. I played a little Petrushka. I played a little Tchaikovsky. It took me like a chorus, and they were like, thank you. And that's why I failed my jazz audition. But I went to Kenny's office. I knocked on the door, and I opened the door, and I said, hi, Mr. Barron. He goes, oh, boy. And I apologized for my audition. I just told him I wanted to learn jazz. And he says, I want you to go get some recordings studying Brown, Professor Bob, and he named some recordings for me to go pick up. And I did. And I started to listen to him. He goes, after you've listened to him, come back and let me know. And I did. He goes, now I want you to start transcribing the solos. And I started transcribing miles, And that's how it all started. I just started to learn solo after solo after solo. And then after I learned a lot of solos, I had some vocabulary. Then he would teach me the harmony behind it all. And say, this is how the song works, and this is how you can analyze every song and figure out how each song works. And I found the more standards that I learned, the more original music I could play, because there were devices of that in every piece. Except for now people are writing so unconventionally that it's trickier to play the music now. But even in some of the unconventional writing, there's still some sort of logic to it. So that's how I did it. And then I played jazz for like 6 months. And I started playing jazz, and about the 5th month in, Kenny Barron was like, I can hear you're really serious about this. Only way you're going to be able to maintain it is to play a jam session or find a place to play. So I did. And I started to play this jam session in D.C., which was like 3 hours from Rutgers, so my trumpet teacher would never find out. And, I would play that Tuesday nights, and I had orchestra Wednesday afternoons, so I'd take the train back and forth. And in this jam session, I met Tim Warfield, I met all kind of great cats, and everybody was always teaching me something, always showing me something. But, I had a hard time with feel, and I met Clark Terry, and he really explained how to create a feel in playing jazz, He talked about the triplet, and he talked about doodle tonguing, and he talked about doodle-la, so Ron Carter's a big component on doodle-la, but Clark Terry, it all comes from him, and doodle tonguing. And he goes, man, if you want to learn how to play 8 notes, just say doodle, 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 doodle. And if you're thinking doodle, 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 because everything for him is singing the vowels, and singing the vowels, and if you start to make doodle in the triplets, then that pretty much evens out your time feel. So Clark Terry explained how to do feel, and then everybody else was giving me so much information and added up. And then after about 6.5 months playing jazz, I met Bobby Watson. And Bobby Watson said, you know, I need a trumpet player. My trumpet player just quit and went back with Count Basie. And I joined Bobby Watson, and it was probably the most miserable 2 months of my life. Because he was so incredibly hard on me, you know. You know, some people say, well, I'm a young guy and I'm playing jazz, I haven't played that long. You know, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter how long you play or how old you are. And it matters how much you've focused on the music. And I hadn't absorbed that much music to really be playing with Bobby. I really, to me now, and even then, I didn't feel like I was very deserving because there were so many great trumpet players in New York. And, but he gave me an opportunity, and I took it. And on the road with him, he would scream and yell at me all the time about, you're not doing this, you know, I'm sick of you trying to play like someone else. I remember there was a night that all I transcribed was Freddie Hubbard for a long time. So I would listen to some Freddie Hubbard and I'd transcribe it. And so one day I was traveling in Germany and Victor Lewis snatched the headphones off of my head. He goes, man, you need to stop listening to that. And here's what you need to listen to. He plugged my headphones in his tape player and he played. And I was like, oof, that trumpet player needs some work. He goes, yeah, that was you last night. So he goes, you need to listen to this and refine this, and this is what you need to pay attention. Freddie has his. He can do his thing. And, you know, he doesn't need another clone. So maybe you should listen to what you're doing and refine it so you don't sound like this night after night. And I was like, point well made, you know. So those guys taught me a lot of valuable lessons about life, how to carry yourself, how to be a leader, how to be a sideman, because there's an art to it all, you know. And there's people that I love working with as sidemen, and there's people that I don't. There's some high maintenance people that I'd rather stay away from, and there's some people that are really easy to work with. So to answer your question, that's how I started to play. And even now, you know, I still want to transcribe. I mean, I still have so much to learn, so far to go. And I'm inspired when I get to be around great musicians and hear how they approach tunes or hear where their spirit and their souls are coming from. So I can be like, wow, that's what I need to do. That's what I need to focus on. Yeah.
So is that the point, at that point, had you found your voice?
No.
At what point did you find your voice?
I think I'm still looking in some ways. I mean, you know, you find your voice. That was a question I asked Faddis, you know, him being such a mentor to me. I said, how do you find your own voice? And he says, you know what? All you need to do is play Terell Stafford, you know. Don't play Nicholas Payton and don't play, because the reason he said this to me, I was on tour. It was called Jazz at the Philharmonic. And I was super, super, super intimidated. This is after I'd been playing jazz for a while. And it was Nicholas Payton that was on the tour with me. So every single night we had to do a trumpet battle. Every night for 8 weeks. Talking about needing to see her shrink. Jesus. And the band was ridiculous. It was Lewis Nash, Peter Washington, Peter Bernstein, Mulgrew Miller, Harry Allen, Eric Alexander, Jesse Davis, and Nicholas and I. And you know, some nights Roy Hargrove would join us, Terrence Blanchard would join us, just different people we pick up in cities. And it was incredible. Clark Terry joined us one night, Winton joined us, Faddis, it was a whole bunch, you know. It was great. And so like the very first night of the tour, I couldn't even sleep. You know, we were in Paris, Vienna actually, and we're going to this concert, you know, and Nicholas was in the practice room doing a warm, you know, playing through some stuff, and I was like 2 rooms away from him, going, oh God, what am I going to play? This isn't fair. So we got up on stage and we played and he just ripped it. And, you know, the whole time my hands were shaking. I was like, what am I going to play? So, you know, I came in and I played thinking like I had to kind of match what he did. And Faddis was sitting in the front row and he came up and he goes, man, he goes, you have 8 more weeks of this. 8 more weeks. You're going to be playing every night for 8 weeks. He goes, the thing that you need to do is play Terell Stafford and let him play Nicholas Payton. If you think about that, then you figure out where your voice is coming from. And the next night, we got on a different tune that we were playing. And I played the way I heard it. He played the way he heard it. And 8 weeks later, you know, he and I are super close friends, and we made it through. I mean, without having a major breakdown. You know, it was good. And so, I mean, I think that's part of it. But I think another part is that I think what we have to do to find our own voice is to listen to as many people as possible. And it's like a big pot of jambalaya or something like that. You know, you just keep dumping ingredients in every time you go somewhere and you hear something. So I'll come from hearing this, and this will be some ingredients I put in. And I think each time I come from a different place or play with different people, all those ingredients start to make who I am and what I hear and what I love to hear. And that's what I do for sound. You know, one of my classical trumpet teachers was like, if you want to have a good classical sound, find 4 of your favorite classical trumpet players, write their names down, and then next to them write the characteristics of their sound that you really love. And I do that, and they write it down for each one, and then go and see which characteristics they have in common. And maybe those are the voice that you have, that you hear from listing those characteristics. So then I did that with the jazz trumpet players too. And you know, and my list is my favorite, they're my favorite improvisers because of their sound as well. So I think, you know, in finding your voice, you have to find a concept of sound. I ask people all the time, what's your concept of sound? And nobody can ever tell me. Because they pretty much pick up the instrument and accept the sound that comes out of it. Whereas I want to have a sound in my head before I pick up an instrument. Then I can present a sound, you know, to people that are listening. Other questions, comments? Maybe we'll play a ballad or something.
Where did the music overlap into the math and computer stuff?
I think it still does in some ways, you know. I'm a gadget freak, so, you know, every new gadget comes out, I get it. Or every new app, I get it. Maybe it'll help me play better or figure something out. But I mean, you know, harmony is all music. I mean, is all math, really, you know. And Clifford Brown was a mathematician. I'm not anywhere. I don't think I'm on a genius level. I'm not comparing myself to Clifford. I'm just saying there's just an interest when it comes to math and playing. And for me, it really helps. I'm just severely dyslexic. So reading words is just like the worst thing for me to have to do in life. And to even read out loud is even, it's terrible. So so when it comes to numbers and math, you know, it's all how I read, and memorizing different formulas helps me to read music. It helps me to play over chord changes, because when I see chord changes and I hear chord changes, I don't play exactly what I see. I have my own kind of way that I deduct harmony, just for me, my simple terms. I'm a very simple-minded person, so I take complex things and make them simple. It's like this class I took in college called Schenkerian Analysis. And it was my favorite class because it took a whole concerto and turned it into basically 1-5-1. You know, and it showed how all the different, with the recapitulation and everything that goes on, basically this whole piece of music that you hear for 35 minutes is 1-5-1. I was like, this is my favorite class because it makes everything simple. And as crazy as my mind thinks, sometimes simplicity is a beautiful thing. So, you know, I guess that's how it overlaps. I like gadgets. I like math and figuring out different ways to approach things. I like formulas. I don't particularly like formulaic playing because it gets to be somewhat sterile. So I find formulas for sounds, you know, that I can say, okay, here's a series of sounds. How can I play these sounds? What do I hear when I play this sound? You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. So, yep.
Judge, the impromptu jam session that you guys had got me thinking, how does Dixieland music and second line rhythms fit into your concept of playing modern jazz?
I mean, I think it's all the same.
It's all the same?
Yeah, you know.
So you don't even have to consciously reconcile it, it's already there.
I don't. It's already, you know, part of it, I mean, I should say this too, you know, there's just jazz critic who I hated when I came to New York. I mean, I actually hated him because he busted me worse than anybody's ever busted. I mean, I get busted all the time, and I can tell you some of those, but this particular person, Kenny Barron told me, man, if you learn this, and this, then I'll have you come up and sit in with me at Bradley's when I played Bradley's, and that was a great club in New York. So I learned everything he asked me to learn, and I went to play with him at Bradley's. And after I finished playing with him, Stanley Crouch came up to me, and he said, your playing has no foundation whatsoever. He goes, you're one of the most shallow players I've ever heard. And I was like, wow, that's pretty powerful. And the people that were in the club, there was George Benson came, he was hanging out, Art Blakey was there. You know, all the cats from the Jazz Messengers, they just got off the road, so they were hanging out at Bradley's, and they came in to hear Kenny, and Ben Riley was playing drums, and Ray Drummond was playing bass. And he called me out in front of everyone and just ripped me one. And he says, I said, well, how am I so shallow? And he's like, well, have you transcribed any Roy Eldridge? I said, no. Louis Armstrong? I said, no. He goes, Bubba Miley? I said, no. Cootie Williams? No. Joe Newman? No. He went down this list and there's everything. I said, no. No. He goes, I rest my case. No depth. That's what's his comment. He goes, so learn your instrument, son. So I left the club pissed off. I drove home and every explicitive I could think of, I said it about Stanley Crouch. And I said it over and over. It was like a chant. Son of a So I get home, I'm all mad, you know, and you know, all my anger was just ego. So 2 days later, I get a phone call, and the phone call was from Faddis, and Faddis was like, hey man, you know, Ryan Kaiser got another project, and the Lincoln Center Band needs a trumpet player. Can you come in and do it? And I was like, yes, you know. So I'm all happy. I'm driving to play with the Lincoln Center Jazz Band and work with Winton. And I get there, and the first thing we played was Black and Tan Fantasy. And you know, Black and Tan Fantasy says plunger and growl. I said, plunger. I got a plunger, but growl. So I hadn't really studied the growl. So I came out and I was like, wop. Winton was like, whoa, bro, what you doing? I said, I'm growling. I said, that's not growling. He's like, you play any Roy Eldridge? I said, no. No. And he went down that same list. And he said, you know, if you don't learn how to use a plunger by tomorrow morning, the rehearsal was at noon, by tomorrow at noon, don't bother to come. I'll replace you. So I went home that night, and there's a trombone player who played with Ellington, actually. His name is Art Barron. He lived in New York, and I called him. I said, Art, man, I don't know anything about plunger playing. Can you show me something? He goes, yeah, come to my house at 8. And I went to his house, and we pretty much shed it from like 8 to 11:30. And I mean, he taught me like the 5 positions of the plunger, taught me how to growl, he taught me how to play Black and Tan Fantasy, basically. So at noon, I went to rehearsal, and the first tune we did was Black and Tan Fantasy, you know. And I played it, and I played the rest of the week with the band. And it just went to show, you know, after Crouch said that in front of those people, if I would have gone home and done my homework, I would have been okay. Then you start to find out, you know, it's, you know, playing straight, you know, bebop and playing what they just played now is basically the same thing. I just left out a few notes, you know, a few guiding or leading notes that may make bebop sound bebop-ish. And so, and I played around the melody a little bit more. So to me,
just being aware of like the idiosyncrasies.
Yeah. And it's a language, you know, so it's like speaking French and German. I mean, we still use nouns and verbs, but it's just a different sound. So to play different genres is basically just me altering the sound, especially for this instrument. You know, this is a huge dominant instrument in Dixieland playing.
And do you think that goes throughout all the instruments?
I think
first,
so.
I'm an electric bass player. Should I go back and learn all
Absolutely.
the Dixieland, like all that Roy Eldridge and everything?
Absolutely.
Okay.
You should learn the history of your instrument.
Yeah.
You know, if you learn the history of your instrument, then there's nothing you can't play. I was having this conversation with some folks about the Vanguard Jazz Orchestra, and my struggle this past year, and it's been a struggle for everyone, but especially for me, is that since I can't be there a lot of Monday nights playing that orchestra, I have to get subs. So that has been, you know, the worst thing I've had to do, because I call people, and there's so many people who just haven't, you know, like Suite for Pops, you gotta play like Pops, you know, as opposed to playing a Jim McNeely chart that's super modern, you know. So you needed someone who can play the history of the instrument, and the subs that I get can't. You know, some people are great readers, but they're not great improvisers, or some people are great improvisers and great readers, but they don't know how to fit in a section. So some of the subs I was hiring for the band, I was getting written notices from the guys in the band, like, never hire them again, never. And the list got long for people don't hire and short for people to hire. So in New York City, I only have 3 subs I can call right now. And if I don't go on those 3 subs, so they just eliminated my sub calling process. So the band is taking over my sub process, which is a strong statement. So, I mean, they're like, we'll find the subs. And it's sad, you know, that out of all the trumpet players in New York, there's very few people that can read well enough, that can come in and play, and that can play different styles and play in a section. It's really sad. It's really sad. And so my days of giving a lot of people chances are over. They just took my privileges away. So I can't hook some of the young guys up like I could, but they weren't necessarily doing their homework, you know, coming in to play in the band. So do your homework. Make sure you learn that so the Stanley Crouchers don't say that to you. And someone has to play a ballad, so I think we'll play a ballad. If that's okay with you. Any other last questions or comments? Yes.
I have one last question. Is there a musician, either dead or alive, that you wish could have or could have a conversation with? You know.
That's a really good question. I mean, you know, I can have a conversation with Clark Terry anytime, and he can speak about more of the history of the music than anybody I've ever met. Same thing with like a Frank West or Jimmy Heath. So I feel like there's still some gems here on the earth that can guide you to where you should be going, you know. And I think we all need to find, like, in life, we need to find mentors that we can attach ourselves to. When young people come up to me and they say, what school should I choose? You know, I want to choose a college to go to. I always say choose a school based on the teacher, you know, because you'll get more education from a mentorship than you will from a shell, you know. And many people want to go to a school because of the name. I want to go to Berkeley. I want to go to Manhattan School of Music. I want to go to Julliard. And then I say, well, why do you want to go to those schools? Who would you study with? Well, I'm not really sure who teaches there. It's really sad to hear, you know, because you don't get anything out of your education. You know, you should come out of an education with a friend for life. And that friend for life should be the person that you study with. And that friend for life can guide you in directions that you would have never thought possible. So people like the Bobby Watsons and the Jon Faddises and even Wynton and Jimmy Heath and Frank West, these guys have given me more opportunities than I probably deserve, you know, which have led to bigger and better things. So, you know, those would be the people. Those not here, I mean, you know, I'm not even sure what I'd ask them because there's so many people here to ask. I mean, I did a long bout with McCoy Tyner. You know, we did a bunch of stuff together. And that was incredible for me because, you know, McCoy Tyner's a man of very, very, very few words. But when he does speak, it's incredibly profound. I mean, there's some messages in there. I never forget, you know, I always ask in master class. This was a very unique setting for people to actually ask questions, so I appreciate it. But, you know, many times I go and I say any questions and people stare at me like, you know, like I'm from another planet when I say any questions. But, you know, McCoy said, there was one day we were out on the road and we were in Tokyo. And there was this tune that he brought in. And on the particular bridge of this tune, there were all these polychords. And every time, you know, it was myself, Steve Terell, and Dave Valentine were the front line. It was McCoy Tyner Latin All-Star group. And so it was a tough tour for me because I'd never played Latin music before. And so Jerry Gonzalez was just like destroying me the whole time for me to learn the clave and the different ways to play over clave, which was really great in education. But there was this particular tune, and on the bridge, it was like maybe like, I don't know, like an E, like a B flat over E. You know, it's all these triads that McCoy put down. And so we were coming in, everybody get to the bridge, and everybody was trying to play over the bridge. And nobody could really find a way to play over it, and we'd all go in the back and scratch our heads. So there was one day, and I was like, McCoy, I can never really play over the bridge of this song, so what suggestions do you have? I said, you know, it's a B flat over E, and he goes, just play a major chord. Play major, he goes, think of it as a major sharp 11 chord. Just look at it that way. And so I said, okay. And so the next night I came in and I played each chord the way he said. And so Steve Terell was like, so Terell, what are you doing over those chords? I said, I don't know. I'm not really sure. What are you hearing? He goes, I'm not really sure what I'm hearing. I said, okay, maybe McCoy can help you. And so Dave Valentine, a couple nights later, was like, what do you play over those chords? I said, I'm just kind of hearing my way through it. Maybe McCoy can. And nobody for the rest of the tour ever asked McCoy to play over those chords. So that kind of said, you know what? Questions aren't such a bad thing. People can judge you if they want, but if you get some information from it, it's all good. It's all good.
Once again, big thanks to